As we now approach the end of the regular season for college football, I can't help but say I honestly at times hate the sport. You may be thinking to yourself, Scott, what on earth are you talking about? But today I've been super angry. We saw an incredible Ohio State-Michigan game, one of the greatest fourth down plays of all time for Bama. We saw Washington hold on against Washington State. We saw Kentucky have a crazy finish against Louisville. We've seen Mizzou win 10 games. We saw Oregon win last night. We saw Texas win last night. And I'll still be awaiting the result of the Georgia game and the Florida State matchup. College football is truly the most special sport, but it has the absolute worst postseason. If you search across sports at all levels across every continent, you will find pretty much one thing in common. Whether you're in the Amazon jungle, the frozen ponds of Canada, or the Swiss Alps in Europe, you'll find that pretty much every sport has a legitimately decent postseason. If you go through pretty much any level of football, you see that multiple teams get an opportunity, and especially at the high school ranks, literally every team gets an opportunity to play in the postseason. I'm not saying that should be a thing in the FBS, but the product that we have in college football right now is absolutely awful. The postseason has been no fun, and for a sport as special and as great as college football, it's an absolute shame. Every year there are numerous really good teams that get left out of the playoff, numerous star players we never get to see play in the postseason, and so many what ifs. This year is probably going to be the biggest sham of all time when it comes to the postseason. Before we get going with the video, I want to interact with more of you guys. Be sure to shoot me a message on Instagram, as I want to know your thoughts and what you think is going to happen to your program moving forward. Be sure to do that real quick, and I look forward to hearing from you guys. Next week, we have an opportunity to see absolute chaos. There is a chance that there'll be 8 teams that have 1 or less loss. If Oregon beats Washington, then both teams will have 1 loss. If Bama beats Georgia, then both teams will have 1 loss. If both Texas and Michigan win their championship game, they'll have 1 or no losses. Ohio State already only has 1 loss, and if Florida State survives tonight and wins next week, somehow the committee's gonna have to sort through having 8 different teams with pretty much nearly identical resumes. In all likelihood, at least 2 to 3 teams are gonna get absolutely screwed, and there are also plenty of other squads that deserve to see the postseason. While Louisville did lose today, I would have liked to see them in the postseason. Mizzou won 10 games and went toe-to-toe with both Georgia and LSU. Liberty legitimately went undefeated. Penn State has plenty of talent. Ole Miss has the potential to hang with anybody. And Oklahoma is not a bad team either. Then you throw in teams like Toledo or Tulane or even the highly explosive LSU, and it really makes you wonder, why can't college football just have a normal postseason like every other sport at every other level? The FCS has plenty of teams. College basketball has 68 teams. The NFL has 14. The NBA has expanded. The MLB has expanded. High school playoffs have expanded. Yet for the last 10 years, college football has been the same thing. For the most part, I think that most people can formulate their own opinions, and most people have logical arguments for the things they believe. The one thing I cannot fathom or understand is when people claim that having a larger playoff is going to hurt the sport. I don't know what world or what rock you are living under, but more football is not an issue, and when more teams can make the playoff, recruits now have more options instead of going to the same 4 or 5 schools. Anything can happen in football, and there are plenty of talented teams. The transfer portal and NIL has only created more parity, and at the end of the day, while Georgia or Michigan may still come out on top in a 12 or 16 team playoff, I'm sure there'd be a ton of incredible matchups, and I can at least come up with 12 teams that I think would be fun to see in the postseason. Imagine Missouri having to travel on the road to Georgia for a rematch. Imagine Ole Miss having to travel on the road to Texas, or Ohio State having to run it back with Michigan. There are only 2 types of people that would complain about that: the media idiots who run the sport already, or the fans of schools like Georgia, Alabama, and Michigan. One thing you'll find is that most critics of an expanded playoff are of all of those big blue blood schools because they want their path to a national championship to be easier. If you're a fan of Georgia, why would you want the Bulldogs to have to potentially play 3 games instead of just 2? If you're a fan of Michigan, why would you want to potentially have to win 3 games instead of 2? It only makes it tougher to win a title, and it only gives you more chances to lose games. I guess I can understand as a fan of those schools why you wouldn't want there to be an expanded playoff, but for everybody else, we at least want to see it given a chance. For example, last year Princeton upset both Arizona and Missouri as a 15 seed, Farley Dickinson beat Purdue, and in the last few years, we've seen plenty of blue bloods go down. For all the people who want to argue that the big blue bloods will win every game, March Madness is the perfect example of why we should have an expanded playoff. Yes, I know basketball and football are completely different sports, but I'm not advocating for 68 teams to get in. For example, the talent gap between Georgia and LSU this year isn't that much. LSU's defense is not great, but this would not be the same as Georgia playing against SIU Carbondale, for example. I know personally I would absolutely love to see a 12 or 16 team playoff this year, especially at 12. For example, depending on how things play out next week, Imagine we have a field that looks like this: a 1-loss Alabama, a 1-loss Georgia, a 1-loss Ohio State, undefeated Michigan, undefeated Florida State, 1-loss Washington, 1-loss Oregon, 1-loss Texas, 2-loss Mizzou, 2-loss Penn State, 2-loss Ole Miss, and undefeated Liberty. I don't think anybody would complain about that 12-team field, and for all the people say that it wouldn't be that competitive, please think again. Mizzou hung with Georgia pretty much the entire game. Penn State only lost by 1 possession to Ohio State. While Ole Miss is sort of the outlier there, imagine if these games were played with so much more on the line. Imagine if a player like Brady Cook or Jackson Dart got a chance to play in the postseason, and how much more passion there would be in these games. The next argument that I'm sure I'm going to see in the comment section a million times is that it'll make the regular season worthless, or that the big time bowl games will be worthless. Well, newsflash for you, no one cares about bowl games anymore, and the regular season will never be worthless. The only thing worthless about the regular season is when the SEC schools play FCS schools in week 13, or teams like Michigan and Georgia don't play anybody until the month of October. I don't think anybody would complain about moving the schedule down to just 10 or 11 games and cutting out some of these games against bad opponents. Yes, I know financially that would hurt some of these smaller schools, but I'm sure there's a way that everybody can eat and that can work out much better than what we have now. Imagine a world in which some of these bigger programs actually scheduled more difficult non-conferences because they have a little bit more wiggle room. In college basketball, you see most of the major brands schedule games against other major brands and really good teams because 1, they can afford to, and 2, it's just entertaining. Oh, how I'd love to see Alabama go play Michigan one day. But because of how college football currently operates, there is absolutely no incentive to do so. I know a couple of series did fall through, but Georgia and Michigan legitimately played no one through the first 4 weeks of college football. It was unbelievably boring for both the average and casual fan, and I'm sure Georgia and Michigan fans were bored stiff out of their mind too. When a game's over at the end of the first quarter, everyone loses. People would claim that games all of a sudden have no meaning and that everything would be watered down. I've also never understood that argument. I don't think Ohio State and Michigan aren't going to compete against each other because they're both likely already going to the playoff. At that point, something like home field advantage or a bye becomes extremely important, and there's always something to play for. All of a sudden, if you're a 2-loss team in September or October, you still have an actual chance of going to the postseason if you can string together wins. For example, if Oklahoma State would have gone 10-2 instead of 9-3, they could have had a chance at making the postseason. Instead, there's pretty much nothing to play for once you get your second loss. There's nothing but a mediocre bowl awaiting you at the end of the season, and maybe someday you'll sign that perfect coach, get that perfect transfer quarterback, and have everything fall into place so you can one day maybe qualify for the postseason. Pretty much everything had to go right for TCU last year, and everything has had to go right for Washington this year, and the Huskies are still not guaranteed a chance to play in the postseason. Just imagine if a team won 90% of their games in any other sport and was left out of the postseason. Everyone would be furious. If expansion of college football was that difficult on the players, then the FCS, D3, D2, high school, and NAIA would not be having bigger brackets. They'd be doing a 4-team system as well. But wait, as I've said many times, every single sport across every continent at every level has a better postseason than college football. At this point, I'm just going on a rant, but I'm sick and tired of a sport that I absolutely love pretty much sucking once the end of November comes around. Yes, we get our 3 playoff games at the beginning of January, but that's pretty much it. The bowl games don't matter. There's so many what ifs, so many missed storylines, and so many missed opportunities. Yes, I understand if you're a fan of a blue blood that this may make your life more difficult or add more stress to your holiday season, but I really don't care. At every other level, that's just how it goes. At this point, college football has been playing with an outdated postseason forever, and thank goodness it's finally going to be coming to an end here soon. Next year, college football moves on to 12 teams, and honestly, I couldn't be more excited for it. Some people are going to say, well, Georgia's probably going to win it anyways, but again, I really don't care. I want to see more football. I want to see more teams have a chance. I want to see more classic finishes. I want to let things play themselves out on the field. And great, if Georgia wins 3 straight games, then congrats to them. They're the best team in college football. I've been salty about this for years, but maybe I'm feeling it a little bit extra because my favorite team is 10-2. Mizzou's had a breakout season, and if this season happened next year, then Mizzou would be going to the college football playoff. They were really a couple plays away from beating LSU and one horrible interception away from making that Georgia game that much more interesting. Instead, the season's pretty much over. Mizzou may go play Texas in a bowl game or something, and from there we'll see Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, and Jonathan Brooks all opt out anyways, so it really won't mean much. That is unfortunately the state of college football. But instead, it would be kind of cool if Mizzou was a 9 seed and they played against an 8 seed of Ohio State in the first round. Would they win? I don't know, but I don't care. It's 10 times more exciting than playing in a worthless bowl. College football is also the only sport where you can go undefeated and also not get a chance to go in the postseason. Would I pick Liberty to beat Georgia? Absolutely not. But does Liberty have a chance to compete for a national championship if they win all their games? I think they should. You may get a ton of angry people who don't care or are totally against expansion, but at the end of the day, just ask them what team they're a fan of, and that'll be the answer. At the end of the day, the fans of these big schools just don't want their road to championships being any harder, and why would they? Also, I don't want to sound like a whiner or anything like that. College football is great, but it does not determine my happiness. It is not my life, and at the end of the day, the world will keep revolving. But I just wanted to say these things because that's what most college football fans think. It's what all my friends think, and it's just logical. College football has a terrible postseason, and this year there are so many great teams that should have the opportunity to play for the national championship. Instead, we're going to get robbed of it, and I'm tired of it. Things may change next year, or maybe it gets worse. I don't know. But I don't know how the postseason can get any worse than it is right now. But what do you guys think? If you're a fan of college football, what do you think of the postseason? Do you think it should be changed? And who's your pick to make the 4-team playoff this year? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you missed today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.